All right, it is time for my week in film. Hey everyone, it is Shannon, and I'm super excited to be here today and to share with you this video. And I haven't been doing this weekly, but I decided to call it Week in Film, so I'm still calling it Week in Film. So maybe it needs a rebranding. But I have seen 5 movies since the last time I've done one of these, and that seems to be a good amount of films to talk about in one video. So maybe it all works out without having to think too much about it, because I've been thinking too much about things. So not necessarily film things, but just in general things. Let's talk about film. So let's get started. The first thing that I watched was This Changes Everything. This is a documentary from 2018. It is centered on women in film, directors, writers, stories, so lead actors. I was just looking to see if there was a helpful description, but there isn't. And it talks about the history. It's pretty American-centric, because it's also talking about the film industry in the States and the fact that it is not very inclusive and what happens when that happens, and also what happens when women's stories are told. So I thought this was excellent. It includes Gina Davis is a huge part of this. She backed a lot of the research that went into looking at how many female-speaking characters were on the screen and how much screen time that they got, as well as there was lots of research about, women, how many women directors there were in terms of union stuff. So there was a lot for me. This is a great combination of things because I love film, and also I love information. So the fact that there was a lot about the research, I love that combination of things. So Gina Davis is in it, Shonda Rhimes, Reese Witherspoon, Sandra Oh, Mira Nair, Patty Jenkins, Meryl Streep. Lots of familiar faces, and to hear their stories throughout the years, and to see, just see the revelation of the stats of how many female directors there are, how many female writers there are, how many speaking parts for women there are, and when there are, what the stories are told. I think they didn't go into that too much. That's something I think about a lot in terms of reading, and so for me, this really hit. One of the things that's for me important in my reading is I like reading stories, women's stories that aren't specifically about romantic or family relationships. And I find that there's very, very few. And so any recommendations are welcome. So this wasn't specifically about that, but it did talk about the importance of hearing women's perspective, women's stories, and the impact of that as people growing up seeing yourself in film, and how often we see the same story with the same male story again and again and again. So this was really, really great. One of the frustrating things that I found about it, and I had this moment at the end, and I noticed a lot of comments said this on IMDb, was that it's directed by Tom Donahue, and so IMDb, like in every review I looked at, everyone commented on questioned why did this have a male director. But then it was like, if you were listening for the past hour and a half or whatever, you would hear that they're talking about how hard it is for women to be to get in the director's chair, to be sustained in the director's chair, to continue to get opportunities. And so I think you have to let that go and look at the bigger picture of what it's saying, and how much they reveal in terms of the information, and how much progress can be made or will be made or has been made. And they talked about the Bechdel test, which I never know if I'm saying that correctly, Bechdel test, and there was a great section about that. If you're unfamiliar with it, it's a very quick test to see the role, if there's significant roles of women in film, and all it needs is 2 named female characters, so female characters that have names. Sometimes the name isn't a requirement, but in the movie they talk about it having names. So 2 female characters with names who talk to each other about something other than men. And the infrequency in which films pass that test is horrific. It really, really is horrific. If you go back and think of the last 5 films that you've seen, maybe, or whatever, whatever the top box office, films are, if you've seen them, and think, hey, did this movie have two women in it who you knew their names and they spoke to each other about something other than men? It is shocking. It really is shocking. So, and for me, this year, I highly recommend this if you did not pick up on that. I highly recommend it. It's available on Netflix here in Canada. And for me, one of the things that I considered doing this year, if I wanted, when I was thinking about my goals at the beginning of the year, did I want to include like X amount of films directed by women, or have a female protagonist, or that kind of thing, and I decided not to, because I decided on some very specific and very throw spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks kind of thing. Like, my goals this year are quite all over the place, because I wanted to see where my interest lies. I know I want, like, seeing films about women, but I thought, I don't know, I decided not to do it this year. So it might be something that I choose to do next year. I'm not sure exactly what I would do, if I would try and go for a 50-50 split, or X amount of films, or X amount of films per month, or at least one film a month. I have no idea. So if you have any recommendations or suggestions, anything that you've done or you thought would be successful, happy to hear it. But I did look back on my numbers, so because I was curious. So without making conscious effort to have gender parity, I ended up, so far as of the end of September, I have watched, and I don't know if these are percentages or numbers. I think they're about the same. I think I've seen about 100 films. So anyway, so at the end of September for 2021, I had seen 67 male lead or male ensemble films, 20 female-led or female ensemble leads. There were actually 16 leads and 4 ensembles, and 13 duos, or a 50-50 split for ensembles. So that's only 20%, or 20 films with female leads. That being said, some of my favorites definitely were Wonder Woman 1984, Relic, Enola Holmes. Enola Holmes really is one of my favorites of the year. I rewatch it all the time. It is so fantastic. I put Lover's Rock on there, but it's a bit more of an ensemble. I felt like the female characters in that were more of the storylines that we were following. Let me know your thoughts on that. It might be more of an ensemble or even a duo. I'm not sure. Some of the duos I watched, I really enjoyed as well. Men in Black International, I would argue as a duo. Obsessed, which is not great. It is more of a trio, but it's really a duo, and it's not the best film, but I did enjoy it. Swamp Thing, I really enjoyed. Love Is All You Need, and Serena, which I thought was actually only okay, but it definitely was a duo. And then in terms of the 50-50 split, some of those are really good. Stowaway is great for that. Jumanji, which is being generous on the gender dynamics, and then also Alien, which is being generous on it's not a 50-50 split, but Ripley's such an iconic character that I kind of but we only have her and what's the other woman's name? I'm getting the actor's name in my head. But anyway, so it's not really, because I think it's Dallas and Kane and it gets complicated. But anyway, it's not 50-50, but I was being generous with that. Anyway, so I definitely recommend that. I definitely want to incorporate watching more female-led or female-specific films. Sometimes I definitely find female-directed movies are I find you do have to look. It takes active effort, but I think it's also worth active effort, and I think it's important to do. So I am hoping to do that. So you may see a bit of a spillover, because that was the first thing I saw. So you may see a bit of an influence of that. Actually, with this first one, I did not know that it would be the case that it was a female lead, but it was quite random of a choice. So the next thing I watched was One Night of Love. It's really hard not to sing that. I can't sing like she does. So this is from 1934. It's directed by Victor Schertzling. And stars Grace Moore as Mary, who we have here, Tullio Carminati as Monteverdi, Lyle Tablet as Bill, Jesse Ralph as Angelina, and Monteverdi as Lally. This was great. So this one I watched for challenges. It's from 1934. 1934, and it won the Oscar for Best Original Score and Best Sound in 1934. I'm also including this in my goal for watching films about the performing arts, because it definitely is about the performing arts. It centers on the protagonist is an opera singer who goes to Italy to live the life of an opera singer. And so it really was like exactly what I was looking for, even though I just picked it because it was like the earliest Oscar winning film for sound and score, and I just rented it and I didn't know what it was going to be about at all. So I actually quite loved it. In terms of that, it just really fit what I was feeling like at the time. It had a wonderful opening sequence with the characters coming on and having little moments with like over music and then their name and their character name coming up underneath. And she's an opera singer, so it had wonderful music that it really spoke to me. I don't know why or what it reminded me of, because it's not something I'm terribly familiar with, but it just sort of evoked something familiar. I will say there was some pretty not great relationships in terms of she's taken on by a mentor and he is very controlling, and there's some weird romance type stuff-ish, like he's sworn off having romances with his pupils. But obviously that seems to be what always happens, which I think now is considered very outdated. Now she's an adult, so there's that, but it was a bit of it wasn't creepy, but it was a bit of an outdated dynamic for sure. And I'm sure that is, I don't even know when, I think that only became outdated pretty recently. Yeah, so there's a lot of power play between them, which I didn't love, to be honest, because he was very much, you must do everything I say without questioning it at all, and he was very controlling of what she did and what she ate and just everything and who she saw and all of these things. So that wasn't good. But the fact her drive and to be an opera singer, that was really, really wonderful, and I really enjoyed the music. So it was a really great pick, and it was really nice to pick something like pretty randomly, and I was feeling like I was going to settle into just picking another thing that's available or the newest thing that's come onto Netflix or whatever, and I'm like, no, and so I was like, no, I don't want to just be guided by what is sitting right in front of me, what's just appearing right in front of me. It's saying, hey, watch me. It's like, no, what do I want to watch? And so this is for one of my goals, and ended up being about the performing arts. Sure, I had to rent it as opposed to being available on the streaming service. It might be public domain, I'm not sure, but I enjoyed it, so I was happy with that. And then I also watched Breaking Surface. This was another completely random watch. It's not for any goals, but it looked kind of creepy. I didn't know the water element. The picture I saw was just of this character, and there was some snow, and I thought for October it might be fun to watch something a bit creepy. So I decided to go for it. It's from 2020. It is written and directed by Joachim Hedin, stars Moa Gamal Ginsberg. She has more names on here. Moa Gamal Ginsberg as Ida, Madeline Martin as Tuva, and Trine Wiggin as Anne. This is a Swedish, Norwegian, Belgium co-production. It's in Swedish and Norwegian. I believe, if I remember correctly, the characters are Swedish and they go to Norway to go diving. So it is in Swedish and Norwegian, but I think it's predominantly in Swedish. And I only know that, like, I can only tell the vast and minute difference. Like, for me, I'm not familiar with either language. I only am basically familiar through film. And so it was like, it reminded me much more of, oh my gosh, he's the huge Swedish director from, like Wild Strawberries, and his daughter was an actress. Oh my gosh, I can't remember. Anyway, so I watched like The Seventh Seal and stuff like that, and I'm like, it feels more like that than like Troll Hunter. Like, so anyway, so this was actually quite tense, and it follows two sisters. I didn't know anything about it, which makes it hard for me to describe what it's about, because when I look at the plot summaries, I'm like, I don't want to say that much about it. But it follows two sisters who are divers. They have a sort of like a bit of a tense relationship, but they decide to go to Sweden to go diving, and something goes wrong. So it's not necessarily a thriller. Like for me, this was a good fit for November because I didn't want anything too tense. And their relationship is challenging, so that was sometimes hard to watch. But I really did appreciate the it did feel realistic in terms of, sometimes people are going to do what they're going to do kind of idea, and how different people react differently in different situations. So this one was a tense one. So if you have any claustrophobia in terms of like underwater stuff or caving or anything, this is not a good one. But for me, it was a sort of nice, like, tense film that wasn't too super scary. I did get emotional in it. I will say that I did get emotional, and so I enjoyed watching it after the fact, but I did have some moments during it that it was hard, and it did remind me that I do love watching films in other languages and watching international films. So I think that might be something else that's also a goal for next year. I didn't track it at all this year. I didn't watch a lot of films like that are in other languages, and I'm not even sure the best way to describe that, like whether I should say international, or like, I know like the Oscar category tends to be foreign language film, but like, technically in Canada I shouldn't include if it's in French as a foreign language films, because we have 2 official languages, and that's getting super specific. Anyway, making me think, and so that was, let me know if you've seen that one. I haven't heard anyone talking about that one. And this next one, I actually put up a poll on my Instagram to ask if people had seen it, and only one person said that they had. So it is an in-year release, and that is Sun. This is written and directed by Ivan Kavanagh. It stars Andy Matichuk, I think that's how you say it, as Laura, Luke David Bullough as David, and Emil Hirsch as Paul. I do not recognize the protagonist, but she has been in other stuff recently, so I'm missing a connection there. So this is a horror movie. This one was for one of my goals, which is to watch movies that are Hoopla movies of the months, and this was one of them from earlier this year. I like following that list because it's not like, it's curated. It's a curated list, but it doesn't feel like advertising, and it gives a nice variety of genres and titles that I've not heard of. Again, it's October, so this looked kind of spooky. The other poster on the Hoopla looks even scarier than this. So this one, again, I didn't know anything about it, so it's hard to say how much to say about it, but it follows a young woman who is a single mother and is trying to get away from a very scary situation, so sets up home somewhere new, and and as her son gets older, some strange things start to happen, and so she reaches out to the police force, which Emil Hirsch comes in, and he's the lead detective type person, and he's quite compassionate and understanding, even though often what she's saying sounds a bit out there in terms of, is it paranormal? Is she seeing things? Like, people aren't necessarily believing her about what she's seeing, and then things start happening to her son. This one, it's tough because I thought the tension was good, the atmosphere was good, the acting was good, but I saw where the story was going like a mile away, and that, I don't really fault the movie for that, because I've seen a lot of horror movies, so after a certain point, like, you just, like, for me, I don't try to, but you just sort of like analyze and process of elimination. Could it be this? Could it be this? Could it be this? Could it be this? And so I felt like I knew where it was going pretty quickly. That being said, I thought it was quite creepy. I really enjoyed the atmosphere. I liked the performances, and I thought it was a really solid horror film. And a bit quieter, a bit more atmospheric, but the pacing was good, and the tension was good, and the acting was good, and all of that is important. So I was happy to watch that. Last up, last up, I watched Mortal Kombat. Oh, I forgot to say, Sun also counts as a 2021 release, as does Mortal Kombat. I already hit my goal for watching in-year releases earlier this year, but I'm still tracking. So Mortal Kombat is a 2021 release, so I'm counting it for that. It was directed by Simon McQuoid, feature film debut. Stars Louis Tan, Jessica McNabbie, John Lawson, Joe Taslim from The Raid, Mika Brooks, Chin Han, Ludi Lin, Max Huang, and I gotta say, I'm starting to feel old when the only actors I recognize other than Joe Taslim are the ands because it stars Haruki Sanada as Hanzo and Tadanobu Asano as Raiden, who I'm both very familiar with and have seen their work, and they're fabulous actors. So this was, a redux, a replay, a new iteration of Mortal Kombat. I've seen the original Mortal Kombat. It holds a special place in my heart, even though it's not great. There was, if I wasn't already 20 minutes in, I would try to remember whatever the story that goes along with it, but I can't remember it. There was a weird story about seeing that one. But this one, I gotta say, I was not a big fan of. I thought the starting was interesting. It is definitely a different take on things. It has some familiar stuff from the original film and from the video games in terms of the characters and stuff like that. I'm not hugely versed in this universe, so don't I'm not the person to say whether it's in line with, all the things. There were things that I found familiar that I enjoyed, and there were new developments that were interesting and engaging. So I'll give it that. It went for a different take on things. That being said, this was R-rated, and it well earned that rating. It was very gruesome. It was very violent, and just explicitly so in terms of some of the things that it did. There were some things that I found disturbing, and I just was like, no, I'm not interested in seeing something that's this level of violence. And so I would really rather watch the PG version. I don't need to see, even though we can do things with effects, I'm like, I don't need to see bodies being battered and then I also thought some of the messages were pretty bad, or at least one of the messages that I remember was pretty bad in terms of, there were two about how you attain your power. I thought were really crappy messages in terms of unlocking, said power. No. So that was my big, sad, and actually a good reminder, because if I look at that set of all of those films, the one that I had seen and heard the most about was Mortal Kombat, and it was the one that I enjoyed the least. Now, I'm not saying when you watch films that you haven't heard anything about that you're always going to love them, because I know I have shot myself in the foot more times than once on that, but I think it's worth the risk, and so it's fine. And I think it's good, as with so many things, it's good to have balance, and if there is a new release I'm super excited about, of course I'm gonna want to watch it, but it's not always the big shiny thing, is not always necessarily the thing that ends up being something that speaks to me. Out of those, I think the one I enjoyed the most, well, this changes everything, One Night of Love had some problems to it, so I don't know, it was a bit of a weird. Sun was really good, but it was creepy. I don't know, but it's October, so I wanted to watch some creepy stuff, so I think the ones I picked were probably good. They weren't too scary. Sun was close. I should have started it earlier in the day. I remember feeling that about. Anyway, so let me know, have you seen any of these movies? Do you ever watch films that you don't know anything about? If so, how do you find them, or how do you choose them? Because that's something that I'm always interested in. So there are my thoughts on the last 5 films that I have seen. I will leave links to IMDb down below if you want to check them out. I know films like Sun are a little, there's a lot of movies called Sun, so direct links are sometimes helpful, so hopefully they are helpful. Let me know what you're watching this October. Have any scary movies that are on the radar, new ones, old favorites? Love to hear it. And I will be back soon with another video. Thank you so much for watching.